Heather, do you want to go ahead and actually introduce yourself and the Missoula YMCA?
You bet. Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Foster, and I'm the CEO of the Missoula Family YMCA in Montana. And I am filling in for our youth governor, who is unable to attend this meeting today. First, I just want to say it's been really inspiring to just sit and listen to you all and eavesdrop a little bit, and reminds me so much of why I do the work that I do. So please know that you all are incredibly impressive, and makes me feel like I'm very hopeful for the future, knowing that there are young people out there like you all. Is the Governor Bullock on the phone? Should I start with my introduction?
He will just be about 2 minutes. He just ran in and then had to run out for something else really quickly. So just give him about 2 minutes. He said he'd be right back.
I totally get it.
Thank you.
Heather, do you want to talk a little bit about the Missoula and how your Y has kind of responded to the past few months? I know it's been quite an experience.
Yeah, you bet. You know, no, you're fine. I can always fill space, right? Isn't that what CEOs are good at? It's really interesting in Montana. You know, I think I'll say a little bit about it later, but you know, our leadership in our state reacted really, really swiftly and appropriately. And I feel like we're very blessed to live in this state, and we're one of the safest places to be in. So we've really entered reopening pretty strongly. We're already in our phase 2. So our Y and our facility is open. Our Y operated emergency childcare throughout, you know, the full 2 months where our state was pretty much closed down. And so we're just slowly tiptoeing back into some sort of new normal. And it's been quite the process for staff, and it's really nice to start to see our members again. And I feel like we've been able to really put a lot of protocols and procedures in place to make sure that everybody feels pretty safe and comfortable. But yeah, so it's quite the time for us all to be alive, and it's scary, and we have a lot of work to do. Did I hear the governor on the phone?
I think I'm on the phone. Am I on the video, or is this just, oh.
We should have our video turned on now. I just want to make sure it's working.
We can see you.
Perfect.
Perfect. Well,
I can't see you all.
Oh.
Is Riley here?
No, so Derek has his screen shared.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Hey, welcome all.
Hello.
Heather will introduce me, then we'll get started.
Yep, perfect. Governor Bullock, it's great to see you. I'm Heather Foster. I am filling in for the Montana Youth Governor today, and I am the CEO of the Missoula Y. So it's my honor to introduce you to this call and these incredible young people. Governor Bullock is the 24th governor of our great state of Montana. He's the former Attorney General for the state and was elected to be our governor in 2012. I'm really pleased to announce that yesterday, Governor Bullock won the Democratic nomination in Montana's Senate primary, so congratulations. Steve was born and raised in Montana and has spent his career fighting on behalf of workers, students, and families. As governor, he's worked to make Montana stronger for future generations, ensuring that his own 3 kids and all young Montanans are able to enjoy the same opportunities afforded to all of us who grew up here, like me. Working with Republican legislators, he's expanded Medicaid, he's made record improvements in public education, protected our lands, and strengthened Montana's economy. When you read Governor Bullock's bio, it's really clear that he's had a heart for service starting at a young age. As a student at Helena High School, he was the student representative for the Montana Board of Public Education. And in 1983, he was the youth speaker of the House for the YMCA Youth and Government program. Personally, as a CEO of a big company here in Montana and a nonprofit, I would really like to say a thank you to Governor Bullock for the incredible work that he's done leading our state through this really crazy, unprecedented crisis. His leadership has ensured that Montana is one of the safest states to live and work in, and we are honored to have him on the call today. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome you, Governor Bullock, to this call.
Good, thank you, Heather. Thank all the governors for allowing me to spend a little bit of time with you today. And this isn't the way that governors from all over the country should be meeting, I know. And for that, I'm sorry. It was a long, long time ago, but yeah, I was also the YMCA Youth Governor. And one of the most meaningful things for me was actually getting to meet my peers from all across the country when we had the chance to gather in Washington, D.C. I think when I did that, that was probably the third plane trip I'd taken in my life. So it was kind of seeing, the world open up a little bit bigger too. And I guess I'd also say, take the experiences that have gotten you to this point and don't just think of it as an extracurricular activity. Either through grace, through hard work, through something intrinsic, you're a leader. And with that leader, being a leader, it also brings with it, whether you like it or not, sort of an obligation. That obligation to, just as with your youth in governments when you meet, to lead something bigger and greater along the way. Little background on my leadership journey, then I'll talk a little bit of some stuff about COVID-19 and things like that. But like when we met for our YMCA Youth in Government, we took over the Capitol. And we got to use the floors of the House and Senate committee rooms. But that had been really the only time that I'd been in our state capitol, notwithstanding the fact that it's 5 or 6 blocks from where I was raised. But the year after I graduated from high school, so I went to college, I was home for the holiday break, and most of my friends were gone, and the quote unquote real estate legislature was meeting. And I walked up to a legislator that I really didn't know. It was a woman named Dorothy Bradley, because I had about a month of free time. And I just said, hey, I'd love to volunteer. I'd like to spend a little bit of time trying to help you. So, I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't making big policy papers or anything. I was getting her coffee and taking notes and things. But this was a time in Montana and America when there was a lot of discussion about how screwed up our public education system was. There'd been a big report that had come out called A Nation at Risk. And they were talking a lot in Washington, D.C. about everything that's wrong with our high school educations. And one time I'm talking to this representative and I said, this makes me so frustrated because, look, as a student, I knew what was effective. I knew what was ineffective. I knew what actually made education good. And all these old people talk about it, but nobody ever talks to the students. So she said, do something about it. I was about your age. I'm like, I can't do anything about it, right? Just a kid that just graduated from high school in my freshman year of college. But she said, well, let's talk about what we can do about it. And we wrote a resolution to encourage local school boards to put student representatives on it and to listen to their voices. And I wrote it. I helped craft, the arguments that I wanted her to make on the floor, and it passed. Now, this didn't change the world, but it showed me that one person with a passion or an interest can not just impact the halls of YMCA Youth in Government, but can actually impact public policy across our state. So don't figure that you're done being governor and say, this is great, it'll look wonderful on the college application, what a neat experience. Think of it as that first step. The bare minimum of ages 18 to 29 voted at the same level that 65 and up. You would decide every single election in this country. But often folks are first of all saying, well, I don't know. How do I get into things? How do I take those first steps? Or will I be taken seriously? You'll only be taken seriously if you assume you're invited. Assume that you're invited to sit at any table and express your interests and your concerns and your passions. Because our country desperately needs you right now. this is a challenging time. And sure, maybe it's always a challenging time, but I think that the stakes are that much greater right now. So I hope the challenges of a global pandemic, which I know, and I have 3 kids, a senior in high school, freshman, and 7th grader. This isn't the way that you wanted to end your senior year if you're seniors by any means. And we are living through an unprecedented time, but it only underscores we need your engagement, involvement, probably now more than ever. I will speak a little bit about serving as governor, I guess, during COVID-19, but then more than that, look forward to a dialogue or answering any questions you might have. Early March seems like a lifetime ago, to be honest. And it probably seems like a lifetime to you all as well. On the one hand, it's gone so fast, but how the world has changed. And it was even early March when we recognized that if we didn't start taking actions, that there'd be consequences. And so I formed sort of a coronavirus task force with the adjutant general, so the head of my National Guard, my chief of staff, my budget director, the head of my Department of Commerce, my state medical officer, the head of my Department of Public Health and Human Services, to start planning for this really before it's even that much on the radar screen. It was actually our last meeting of the National Governors Association, Democrats and Republicans in DC in early February, where halfway through that meeting, the governors asked for an executive session, said, we want the head of the CDC and Dr. Fauci and others to brief us because we want to get a sense of what's happening. In Montana, though, I declared a state of emergency before we even had our first coronavirus or COVID-19 case. We had closed our schools before, dang near, just looking around, almost every one of the states that you represent. We did a stay-at-home order before well over half of the states. And we tried to make it in a way where, you know, as you do these that impact the whole state, you try to think through what the challenges are, but you also know that you're going to impact people's lives and not always in a positive way. Like I knew when I closed down schools statewide that some kids would be hurt, not just academically. For many of our peers, the safest place they have to go every day is to our schools. And as we did this, we tried to be really open and transparent with Montanans and say, this is why we're doing this. And as a result, Montanans came along with me, meaning that it wasn't just the heavy hand of government. It was, we knew that we were all in this together. Montanans generally were a little bit libertarian. We don't trust government much, but we care about our neighbors. And it really was Montanans caring about their neighbors that made us go forward together. As a result of early actions and aggressive actions, I see Hawaii on there, but it's Montana and Hawaii that have had the lowest positive cases per capita in the nation and the lowest hospitalizations as well. And it's not just because we're sort of rural states. You know, my neighbor to the east, South Dakota, took a different action. They have 10 times the number of cases that we do. So in part, it's certainly the actions of government and trying to make it so we do this based on sort of not the political sides of this, but the public health sides of this. Like I've woken up each day saying, this is a public health emergency and this is an economic emergency. This isn't a political emergency. Even though, yes, there's political implications, but if you do right on the science, the public health, and then look toward the economic, the politics take care of it. Now, not all, unlike all of you being on this call, that every week we have calls with just the governors. No outside, no press. And we both raise shared concerns. We bounce things off one another. We talk about how we can be better individual leaders, and then how we collectively have power as a National Governors Association when we can speak from a unified voice. Heather had mentioned, so we're reopening, and we're reopening based on, I think, the health side of this, and not the economics or not the politics, but because of what we've been able to do with this virus so far. Part of staying open, though, is to continue to make sure that it's a new normal, meaning you can't go back to exactly how things were, because with this virus in our midst, we're going to have to learn differently, learn to live differently. So yeah, we encourage masks. Yeah, we encourage social distancing. Yes, we encourage, disinfecting and washing our hands. But then we also want to make sure that, because new cases will arise, when we do get a new case, we're immediately doing sufficient testing around that and contact tracing to make sure that one case doesn't become a cluster. Earlier today, we have 8 federally recognized tribal nations. So I was way on the other side of the state at the Fort Peck Nation, Assiniboine and Sioux, where we stood up drive-through testing. Say anybody that wants one, because especially when you live in multi-generational housing, like was talking to one family member, one tribal member that said, we have 15 people living in our home, all the way from 2 years old in the 80s. The quicker we can get our hands around sort of what the challenges are in an immediate case, the more likely it's not going to spread. And then we work to try to turn around and educate folks from your states that'll be coming to Montana this summer for tourism. Say, be as careful when you're here as we ask Montanans to be careful. Recently opened up Yellowstone National Park. So we've set up all kinds of testing around that. We're figuring out ways to be testing our frontline workers. Part of this as a governor, as you all are, is not only do you work with one another, but you have to work with the federal government. Sometimes the federal government can be your friend. Sometimes the federal government can be a challenge, to be honest. Like through COVID-19, the mantra has been that this is a disaster that's locally executed, state managed, and federally supported. So each one of your peer group, the existing governors, each one of us is tasked with managing the response to this in our respective states. And there have been times where incredible people working on this in the federal government, where we've been able to get the support we need from the federal government. And there are times, many times, where individual governors have felt like, well, we're on our own and we've got to figure this out. I've been in office, as Heather noted, 12 years now. And I've dealt with what I think were incredible challenges, from, record fire seasons to having individuals shot in the line of duty, to protests, to educational challenges. There's nothing that's been more intense in my time as an elected leader than this. And I've said each and every decision is a judgment call. And I hope as you go forward as leaders, you also think about part of making good judgment calls is having the right people around you. When I first got elected, I took my senior staff and my cabinet, and we went on a retreat, and I read 2 stories, which was a little bit dorky maybe, but one you probably haven't read one yet. It's a political philosopher called Machiavelli. And Machiavelli talks about how essentially the way to lead is just with brute force and power. And you have to destroy everything and everyone around you. And that's the way to get respected. And I said, I never want any of you to think that way. Because the way to actually lead people isn't through fear, it's to bring them along so they feel like they're part of the leadership journey. And then the other was a story that you know from a long time ago as a kid. There was like the fable of the emperor that has no clothes, right? This emperor was walking around naked and everybody around him was saying, oh, you look so wonderful. You look so wonderful. And if I end up surrounded by my coworkers that will tell me that everything I say is bright and brilliant, well, they're not doing their job. They're letting me be naked every day. Because the responsibility of a leader is also to get the right people around you and then empower those people to tell you when they think you're flat out wrong. Now, you can go back and forth as long as there's that comfort level. And if you say, as long as you as the leader have heard them and say, I respect what you're saying, but this is the direction that we're going, then I think it also empowers the individuals to be honest and then know at some point we all have to get on the same team. So I'll close and answer any questions with, first, again, congratulations. You didn't get here by chance. It's not just because you have good smiles or a few good friends. You earn every position that you get. If you hadn't stood up in the first instance, you wouldn't be here. If you hadn't worked hard, you wouldn't be here. So celebrate that, but don't end with just a celebration. Remember, it also comes with an obligation to make your school, your community, your state, and your nation a little bit better. And we desperately need your voice. And I'm counting on, I look forward to years from now getting the list of here they all were, you know, those 4 folks from Kentucky, here's Lexi from Michigan, on, and saying, look at where these people are now, because I'm counting on you all to take the reins of leadership. I'll stop there. I'd love to answer any question that you might have.
All right, we're gonna go straight to Alina from Maryland.
Hi, my name is Alina. I'm the Youth Governor of Maryland. So my question is, governors are obviously in a very difficult position right now, managing both the ongoing response to COVID-19 and the protests and the calls for action in response to the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. How are you balancing the 2 issues while maintaining calm and keeping your citizens hopeful for a better future? Also, how are you personally doing with everything that's going on? I'm sure the press doesn't take a moment to ask you that very often.
How am I personally dealing with it, or?
How are you personally doing?
Oh, how am I personally doing? Well, thank you, Alina. And I'll also say that, so I was chair of the National Governors Association 2 years ago. And my vice chair, the number 2 person, was the Republican governor from Maryland, Larry Hogan. And he was such a good partner to me when I was the head of it. He's head of it now. Directly to your question, look, it was a lot for this country to handle just with COVID-19, right? And 8 days ago, 8 minutes woke a lot of people up. And I say woke a lot of people up because there have been systemic issues long before Minneapolis. And there are things that need to be done to address those issues. I know, even seeing some people on this call, I will never have to say to my son when he's driving, make sure if you ever get pulled over to immediately just put your hands on the dashboard. Now, I have also, through my experience in public office as Attorney General, I led the Law Enforcement Academy. There are incredible, incredible peace officers that work each and every day to keep our communities safe. That doesn't diminish from the systemic problems, and it doesn't diminish from the fact that, look, in any profession, there are some folks that sure as heck shouldn't be there, and we have to address the systemic problems. How I've dealt with it is a number of different ways, I guess. One, it was last Sunday at a rally in Helena. I didn't want to be the speaker and the lead of the rally, but I sure wanted my 18-year-old daughter to have the opportunity to go and to equally express the concerns that she had as one of your peers and to show support for that rally. And I think that, you know, we've seen both. We have to protect the First Amendment right to protest. And we have to actually be able to, as elected officials, hear what's being said. But then we also have to figure out the ways that we can have this expression in a peaceful and lawful way. Because community safety does become a significant part. And just like every peace officer isn't good, everybody that's been engaging necessarily in protests at times, there's been some opportunism. So it is, when I began at the start of saying, we need your voices so desperately, and this is a challenging time, the dual facets of this are part of what makes this a challenging time. Anybody that says, well, we're a long way past segregation, so life is good, doesn't recognize the continuing challenges that we have in this country. And I think we have a collective obligation to first daylight those challenges, not be afraid to discuss the inequities, the at times racism that still exists, the discrimination that can still exist, but not to accept it and say that together we can be a lot stronger. To your second point, Lena, that, yeah, this has been, overall, you know, it's, again, you try to, both as a leader and as a parent and as a community member, not just project a false strength, you know, and I've had days through this where, like, my 15-year-old daughter says to the rest of the kids, Dad's really had a rough one, because I do have to, each and every day when you're trying to make decisions in the state capitol, do it in the best way and be as positive about it as you can. But for me, and my outlets are, I don't look like it, but I'm a runner. I've run Boston Marathon, you know, like 4 or 5 times. For me, that's the one time for me to be alone and to sort of get lost in my own thoughts. So I try to find that time just for myself, and I jealously guard it, because I think doing things like that make me a better leader along the way. And I think every governor is so over this virus, just like all of you are. I just wish the virus was as well. And we need to continue to figure out the ways to lead with compassion and strength, recognizing with this, you know, I mean, the one thing that made me happy, because I've also had protests around the Capitol for the way that I locked down, supposedly shut down the businesses and things. Was so pleased, because I even worry about, with all this mass protesting, the spread of COVID-19. It was great seeing most of the people there protesting actually wearing masks and trying to do some social distancing. I know that won't happen in all your urban areas, though.
Let's go to, thank you, Lena. Vivian from Texas.
Thank you. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for talking to us, Governor Bullock. Like he said, my name is Vivian Garner. I'm the Youth Governor of Texas. And my question for you is, what were some of the most valuable lessons that you learned while chairing the National Governors Association? And which aspects of the NGA do you think that we should carry over to our own Youth Governors Association?
So the most valuable, Vivian, is that, so you're dealing with 50 5, counting the territory's CEOs, that are all strong-willed and have their own views and real disparate political philosophies. Now, some of the best things that I ever found, though, was when, and we actually started having more and more of just governors-only meetings. Not even our staff, nobody else. Because your peer group is small. And then you even realize that you may have real different philosophies, but there are some things you share in common and that you can find that commonality. I mean, in this hyper politicized time, one of the real challenges for all of us is to find commonality with people we disagree with. And that doesn't mean you're going to be equal on everything along the way or, you know, sort of kumbaya, but find the common pieces as governors, which is what we try to do. There were things on healthcare where a lot of different views about the Affordable Care Act, but we could get all 50 governors to agree, or the vast majority to agree on things. And I'd mentioned to the Maryland governor before, the Maryland Youth and Government governor, having a Republican colleague as my vice chair, and he and I work together on so many things where he might be a more effective voice for some of these Republican governors, where I could move the Democrat governors. But we were lockstep in that we know that each one of us, through our own different ways, are trying to do the best by the states. So I bring that time in from, first of all, stealing from one another's best practices, which we do. Like the best leader as a governor actually stole it from one of the neighboring states. Having that time to get to know one another, because even as you get to know one another on a personal level, that also strengthens the professional and political level. And figure out places where you can speak with dang near one voice. Because your one voice, even though you're just the youth governors, is so much stronger collectively than it is individually. When you can say you have a diverse group of men and women, young men and young women who are entrusted with leadership, asking things of my generation or others, people sure as heck ought to listen.
Derek, this is McCall. Maybe just one more question.
Great.
That's all? Did I talk too long?
Sorry.
I get it. Let's do Martine from Florida.
Hello, my name is Martin Martinez. I'm the youth governor from Florida. As a governor, you work a lot more closely with your constituents on difficult issues than many of our federal officials. And how do we, as youth governors, help move our peers from reaction to action, and especially when people from different backgrounds and beliefs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Martine, because it is like, yeah, I often say that I see the reality of my actions or inaction when I go to the Target or department store, right? And somebody walks up to me. I often feel that, to be honest, that Washington has kind of become a place where people give these great speeches, but nothing gets done. And talking's been the substitute for doing. But to your exact point of how do you get people from reaction to action? Because the status quo, unmoved, will just be react. First, you got to empower your generation. And your generation, by the way, is empowered more than any, certainly in my lifetime. When I think about a lot of the discussions about climate, it's coming from you're the voices that's starting to lead. With gun safety, with other areas. But empowering and helping people know, just as you hopefully have learned through this and other thing, Martine, that your voice can resonate, giving people that opportunity, inviting them to the table of leadership. So what I mean by that is that not saying, I'm Martine and I'm your leader. follow me. If you invite them, if you give a little bit of your either authority or your passion or your interest to someone else, you've invited them to the table of leadership. And then they will be empowered. I would say, and you'll talk to people that don't agree with you. Figure out ways to disagree without being disagreeable, meaning that the best way to make it so that someone's is only going to react and not take action is if they feel like you've completely shut them down and they have no value. Even if they philosophically and fundamentally disagree with you and you, like, I don't know if I can find anything in common, do it in a way that doesn't diminish them, but actually maybe can make them even feel heard along the way. Because even if you don't agree with him or her on that moment, you might find something along the way. My first day of the state, when I got elected governor, my kids were 6, 8, and 10. And like the youngest in 40 years in Montana. I'll never forget, we move into the governor's house and my son kicks the soccer ball, it bounces off this painting. You know, someone in the house says, oh, the painting is worth $250,000. And I'm like, take down all the damn paintings then, right? We have to live in this house. But during my first state of the state, and we were deeply, deeply divided, our state was politically. I got up and I said, you know, my name's Steve, I work for the state. But I said, you're going to hear different noises from the governor's residence in the governor's house. And that's the sound of laughter in young kids. And we as elected leaders have to recognize our kids learn from our words and our deeds. What we say and what we do matters. I said then, our kids are watching. I believe that's true more today than even then. Now, to my point, though, is everyone around you, even your peers, will learn from your words and your deeds. How you act, how you respond, how you lead, people will learn from that, and they're watching. So be that it can actually inspire them up along the way, and you'll empower folks that much more.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Governor, and thank you for taking the time. I know that our students greatly appreciate it. I know that this is not the governor experience they imagined, but it is. We are excited to have this Youth Governors Association launch at a time where we can't meet in person in DC. So thank you for the inspirational words and for the lessons today. And we look forward to speaking to many of your colleagues over the coming year and to the great work that the NGA has done and helping support that within the work that the youth governors are doing in their states.
That's great. Thank you, Derek. Thank all of you. Do good out there.
Have a good night.